Hey y'all, I'm Leah Hernandez, a publisher, author, and entrepreneur who's worked in the book industry for nearly a decade. Welcome to the Black Powerhouse Podcast, a space for anyone navigating the world of books. We're here to talk about the industry through the lens of Black voices, how we can build our careers, make meaningful connections, and push for the change we need to see. Let's dive in.
Malaika, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you, Leah. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so before we start, I'd love to just share with the audience how we met because we just met this year, and I think it came in the most beautiful, divine way. So, for those of you who do not know my story, I studied at Clark Atlanta University here in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I started my publishing company, Muse and Young Authors Publishing. Now, a few months ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Paul Coates over at Red Classic Press. And he came to our office, he looked at our books, we met through another organization. And as we were talking, he was preparing to speak at the Writers' Conference on Clark's campus. And when we met, he just stopped me and he was like, just stop, just stop. He was like, you need to meet Malaika. Are you busy right now? And I was like, no, I have some free time. So he was like, please come with me. Like, I have to connect you two. And I had the pleasure of meeting you, where I also learned that you also studied at Clark College and Atlanta University before it came Clark Atlanta University. Quick history lesson for y'all on HBCUs. And so I just thought that it was so beautiful that the three of us all attended and walked the promenade on Clark Atlanta University's campus and have all had careers. You two extraordinary careers in the publishing industry. And for someone like me, that's so important because when I first started working in this industry, I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me. And I always found myself going to trade conferences and publishing conferences and being one of two, one of three. And so it was such a beautiful surprise to meet you two, learn more about your career, and know that we walked the same hallways and the same promenade at CAU.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the kind words. But trust me, we were as thrilled, at least as thrilled to meet you as you were to meet us, for all the reasons that you said. Paul and I both being book nerds, that's what bound us together, so many years before. And understanding how important the tradition, the literary tradition is in African American and Black global culture. And what an incubator the HBCU, the AU Center specifically, has been for Black intellectualism, Black thought, activism, everything. And it is his prayer and mine that you exist and doing the work that you do. So thank you, thank you. And we're just getting to know each other.
Yeah. And again, thank you, because I feel like a lot of the reason why I'm able to exist and do the work that I'm able to do is because of the work that you guys have done for so many decades. So I'd love to, you have so much experience in your career, but I'd love to take it back to the beginning. So when you first started at Clark College, your first time on campus, did you know then that you wanted to work in the book industry?
I actually did. I had no idea how that was going to happen. But for me, it begins really from a child. My family fed me books so early and consistently um, that it's a habit for me. By the time I get to high school, I'm already hooked on reading and writing. And I worked on my high school's literary journal. And that was an interesting experience because I was in the 1% of my junior high and high school as far as race is concerned. It's 1% Black. So there's that. So by the time I get to Clark College, I'm I already want to be an editor, but again, I had no idea how to do that. No, I didn't know how if I could tailor my coursework to that. I rather began, and my degree is in the social sciences, and I rather had the idea at first of getting a degree in political science, and I got a minor in mass communications. So that's as close as I thought I could get. I didn't want to go the English department route, because to me that was studying literature that had nothing to do with what I wanted to do moving forward. And it wasn't Black literature that I'm talking about. I'm talking about European literature in the English department. So yes, I did know it, but it took me until graduate school at Atlanta University to figure out how this could happen. That is a career in publishing.
Yeah. And that's so fascinating because I feel like now people who want to work in publishing, I think their first mind is to go the English route and to get a degree in English. But I think that the experience that you get, especially in mass media, probably gave you so much exposure to approaching this work in publishing very differently, which are honestly skills that you need to be a great publisher and a great editor in any aspect of the book industry.
Yes, yes, because my primary passion was to be an artist, really, to be a writer. So, there was that side. I did have this vision of being in publishing, but greater than that, I had this passion for writing. And I've been writing stories and poems and whatnot from the time I was quite young. So that was what people saw of me first, and that's what led me to the Clark College annual Writers Workshop Conference that just that just deepened my, passion and interest in um, publishing from the other side as a writer, being a published writer. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like everyone who comes into publishing at some form of capacity secretly wants to be a writer or already is. So it's funny to to learn. I feel like more conversations I have with people, I realize, oh, you're a writer too. You're an editor, but by heart and by trade, you're a writer. I'd love to learn a little bit more about what your first publishing job was and what did that role include?
Actually, while I was a student in Atlanta, I got work study jobs at the Institute of the Black World, which was a consortium of Pan African and scholars from around the world, from around the diaspora. And it was at IBW, literally blocks right across the street from where Clark's current radio station is, that I learned the basics of production. I learned how to typeset, burn plates. Some of this is going to be foreign because it's analog printing, and production. I ran a press. I learned how to run an AB Dick 360 printing press. So we made short books, we published monographs. So, and the organization sold books and its pamphlets and distributed its newsletters through direct mail, land mail. So I was a young person managing the mail list, printing the brochures, collating them, stapling them, getting them stamped, to go to the post office, it was a whole thing,
Full 360.
yeah. So, that was in earnest the foundation of my publishing work experience. Then, after from Atlanta University's Master's in Library Studies program, I found out about publishing courses. So I went to Howard University book publishing course, and that's where I got my first corporate job in publishing. I had the option, I got offered a job as an editorial assistant in New York at HarperCollins, and a job as a college textbook sales rep with Addison Wesley, which would keep me in the South, one of their Southern territories. And I love that idea of moving to New York. I couldn't figure out how I could financially pull it off. I
Yeah.
was really intimidated. I wasn't intimidated by, or let me put it this way. I was brave enough as that young person to dive into New York, but I was, but I needed a place to live. Okay. So I chose the college textbook sales rep job, which was one of the worst jobs I ever had in terms of personal pleasure. But it
Yeah.
was boot camp. It was so good for me, to be that on the sales side, to be in this job where I was the first Black person, first Black sales rep they had in that territory, from Charleston, South Carolina to Cocoa Beach, Florida, to work in this environment, what it put me through, the paces it put me through, uh, last up to now, So that was my first corporate job, was in sales. Then I went back to Atlanta. Um, it's also the first job I got fired from, too, you know. And so I went back to Atlanta, and then I bit the bullet, found a place, found a roommate in New York, moved to New York without a job, but got a job as an editorial assistant within a couple of weeks. And that
Oh,
was New American Library.
which is impressive. I know people who have been trying to get industry jobs for years. So the fact that you pulled it off in a few weeks is really impressive. And it's fascinating that you say that although the sales role experience was the one that you least was your least favorite, you didn't really enjoy it, but it taught you so much. Can you explain a little bit more about what a sales job and role taught you? Because in my experience, I will say we published over 40 books. We're an independent publisher. And the sales part is like the most frightening part for me. Like the production of the book, the editorial, like I'm all game. I'm even great with like coming up with the marketing campaigns. But when it comes to being a sales rep and selling that book, it can become very fearful for me. And I'm like, I feel like I shrink up and I'm like, I don't know what to do anymore. Where did everything go? How do I sell this book now?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it would have been the same for me, but at that time, so many things have changed in general in the job market, including the way young people get recruited to jobs. Um, First of all, in just interviewing for assistant jobs, I was flown in. In those days, this was 1980, 81, early 80s. They would fly a publisher, that is, a candidate even for an assistant job in from out of town for the intern. That would like never happen, these days. Um, so, but and also once you got the job, you were trained in ways, and I'm not sure that they train people these days. Meaning, they shipped all of us away, the new hires. Um, Addison Wesley did, to a retreat for training that was conducted by IBM. IBM had the tech company had a sales training thing. So they actually taught you how to do it, because I don't have those instincts either. Like you, it was a little intimidating to me. I didn't know what to do. It's like, here are books, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So we were trained in that. So that was good for me. No job experience, I dare say, goes to waste if you appreciate it in a particular way. Is if you look at every job you have as just a course of study,
Mm-hmm.
it's just another class you're taking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just can be a longer class, but sometimes you can get what you need, in a short bit. But one, to answer your question more precisely, being a sales rep taught me how to do presentations, for example, because you have to prepare for that. You could create that one. You're given one sheet, and you create one sheets that bullet point the items for you to go in and know what you're going to say, in this case, to that college professor to get that person to adopt your book, right? It's a little easier for me. If I'm going to sell something, it's going to be books because I'm passionate about it. So I don't have to fake the enthusiasm, except I was selling books for a company that published that in the hard sciences was computer books, and this was back when uh, um, we talked about computer languages. I don't know if you know about that. I can't even remember the names of them, but so I did have to, and I knew nothing about that. I was selling differential equations textbooks, and they didn't
That's a
expect.
hard sell. That
They didn't expect us to read the book and be able to evaluate it and say, "Ooh, this is the best." You know what I'm saying? We had a script. So you learned about presentations. You learned just that give and take with a customer, developing customer relationships. Publishing is a business of relationships.
That's gold. Say that one more time because it's for the people in the back.
Yeah, publishing is a business of relationships. So it doesn't matter how talented, how brilliant, how beautiful you are, how perfect your resume is. You got to have some chemistry and rapport with somebody.
Yeah.
You have to.
I'm sorry, go finish.
Yeah, but that is a lot of it. I was also traveling in the company car, driving to all of these places. And that was another, that was an adventure. It was pre-cell phone. So here I am, a girl in, a nondescript car driving between Charleston, South Carolina and Cocoa Beach, Florida, encountering all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Now that fed my creative writer side, but I thought, I had this fantasy that I'd have this job and it'd require work, but not a whole lot of thinking. They'd be putting me up in hotels and, I could be like Maya Angelou and, writing in the hotel, later on, with my glass of wine or whatever. I tell you, I did not get much writing done at all because while sunsets and beaches are great inspiration to me, there's nothing less inspiring to me than a Ramada Inn in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
In a room, with a plastic bedspread.
Didn't really set the tone for the creative juices to flow. But I could see how the adventure of driving and going city to city and meeting new people, all those experiences, I feel like fuel your creativity and fuel the artists. Artists have to live. And so I think that it's also really beautiful that in your trade day job while working in publishing, you're able to experience all these different things that give you new perspectives on what to write about. But I want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier about relationship building. So from 1985 to 1991, you worked at Simon and Schuster. You quit and then were rehired in 2002, where you became vice president and senior editor at Atria, which is giving high demand. You came back, and I'm assuming that there was a promotion in there. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you learned about relationship building from your time in SNS, and how did you learn to not only build relationships but maintain relationships over the years.
Yeah. I think fundamentally it's by being genuine with people. I mean, they're nice people and weird people and, everywhere. And I generally like people. So I'm going to lead in my interaction with people, no matter how superficial or how serious, I'll say, the same way with respect and an expectation that I will receive that back. It really does get, it's manners keep ego in check, and I think that that is important, especially where you're entering foreign territory. Um, I was entering publishing, was entering a very white world, having left the womb of the HBCU, right? So I'm in this corporate world, and it's New York, and everybody's so smart, and so seeming so
Yeah.
assured, and and all this sort of thing. So you just kind of have to literally, just take a breath, be yourself, and do your job. And one thing I learned from the womb, and a lot of Black and brown people learn from the womb, is how to work hard and take direction and be polite. You know what I mean? We're raised, socialized to serve, in that way. The greater challenge, I think, and for me, is asserting ourselves to say, wait a minute, I have a bigger idea for you.
Mm.
Okay. And that's where you have to rely on your what you have inside you, not your degrees, not anything. I think if you're confident about yourself and respectful, then it doesn't guarantee that you're going to be treated nice all the time, but it's going to guarantee that you attract, a lot of who you are. And those are other, I've encountered, wonderful, brilliant people. I've developed friendships and mentorship relationships with people who were legends to me, already heroes to me, so it's having faith in yourself in a relationship, but also keeping cool and keeping calm and not responding when you're insulted,
Mm.
because
That's
you're going to be insulted.
Yeah. There's another segment of this show, which is later on, which is Let's Do Better. That's what I'm calling it now. And I want to highlight and talk about some of those things, because I know that a lot of allies are listening to this show. And very similar to you, when I came into this industry, I have developed a lot of great relationships with mentors, white mentors who have helped me, who have taught me what a P&L is, what a tip sheet, and really have, given me so much knowledge and wisdom in this industry. But on the flip side, you do encounter, I feel like, maybe a lot of well-meaning white people, but maybe don't have the self-awareness of the things that they say and do. And especially leaving the HBCU hub, that was a huge culture shock for me. Luckily, similarly to you, I'm from Southern California, so I grew up in very diverse schools. And then I go from that to then going to HBCU, going to Clark Atlanta University. And I was around my people all the time. And then I went from that to a completely white industry. And that, I feel like, for me personally, it took me a few years to shake that culture shock. Luckily in my day to day, my team is very diverse, but when I have to go to trade shows and sales conferences, I'm reminded of the space in the industry that I'm in, which is not very diverse. So I'd love to switch gears a little bit. And for let's see, the assistant editor, maybe the intern that's working for a corporate publisher who's a person of color, who's dealing with microaggressions every single day, what advice would you give to him or to her on how to continue the marathon of being in this industry while also having to balance the microaggressions that exist in the space?
Yeah. I think the first thing is just to take a beat or two or three. you know, you can count to 10 if you had that much time,
Yeah.
literally take the breath and understand, one, that somebody else's view and opinion of you, one, you can't control. Two, is not even your business, but since somebody has imposed their thing on you, that is not your business, what you think of me, then you have to respond. And I believe in responding uh, and standing up for myself, but understanding that you have a job. You have to feel in your gut, you know, uh, where your boundaries are. If, for example, there's some microaggressions, some insults I was never subjected to. And I think part of it is that they just, just to put it in the street way, they knew not to come for me that way. Like, for example, my appearance, you know, um, my appearance, meaning having natural hair from day one, in the office. It was like the hair has been the hair since I was
Mm-hmm.
to it. The how I dress, how I accessorize, it's been that way. And I come from a deep culture and a long tradition of being fly, you
Oh
know,
no, that's right.
as opposed to, what I'm saying, whatever the corporate. And I made a decision. I consciously made the decision to be myself, to do what I would do naturally in my own world if these other people didn't exist, as much as possible. Because I was used to being in a minority. I was used to being around, overwhelmed by non-Black people, coming from East Tennessee. I was the only Black girl in my graduating class in school. I was used to that, which is why I got decided to go away from that in the HBCU. So when I come back to it, I know just to take a breath, mind my manners, and keep my ears open, because I learned so much from just letting somebody have their say. Because often they're not even talking to us. It's people talking, how people talk about you and your presence. For example, in the sales rep job, I remember two potential, they were college professors, they were a big deal, whatever, supposedly on their campus. And they're looking at me like I'm a marvel. And they say to each other in front of me, "What accent is that? What way of speaking is that?" And then I didn't jump in to try to answer their question. They were not, as far as I'm concerned, they're not talking to me. They're like wasting my time because I need to make this, presentation and move on.
Right. You're like, I got another sales pitch. Let's keep it going.
Yeah, and then so they answer their own question, because
Mm.
our answers, even about ourselves, don't count anyway. So one says, "Oh, that's an educated speech." So okay, what's the surprise there? It's like saying, calling somebody articulate. You know what I mean? Calling a Black or brown person or a person otherwise stereotyped articulate. So you have to just let people perform and
Mm.
not take it personally.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. Listen, observe everything, pay attention, go away and sit with it. And you'll have the answer as how to respond yourself in. This is only personal and nobody has to believe in this, but I don't think revenge is very productive.
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know, and people can take that however they want.
Yeah.
Do the other thing I learned, and I don't want to talk too much, but is stand your ground and stay in your position until you are ready to leave or external circumstances move you out. Because 9 times out of 10, the people who are torturing you, um, often I'll say they're going to leave the company before you do. Even
Mm.
your boss. I've had people that it's like, "Oh Lord, please take this person out of my life," and they're gone. You know,
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah.
the people did it or whatever. But I have outlasted so many people I didn't like. I had a guy in my first year at Simon and Schuster. He had been there already for some time, but he was not a full editor. He was still an assistant or associate who, took me to lunch. and said that he didn't think that the company was for me.
Hmm.
I haven't seen that guy in, I don't know, 25, 30 years. I
Yeah.
ended up at that company for 18 and a half years.
And continue to move up. And where did he go? Where was he at?
But
But I think
listen,
that's a great point.
yeah, he might be sitting on $1 billion. That's another conversation. He might be the head of some bank in Europe for all I know.
Right. Right. Or found a way to, yeah, to get on the business side, which I'm glad that you brought up. And I think for anyone listening or any person of color who's working in corporate publishing, because I think corporate publishing, independent publishing, whether you're a bookseller, there's so many people that exist in the ecosystem of the book world. But at some level, regardless of what role you have, I think you are going to come face to face with people and honestly just a culture that simply was not built for us or built to support who we are. But I love that you just encourage the audience to, what I heard is to not code switch and to show up as yourself, but to listen and to be attentive because people are going to tell on themselves. And like you said, that person may not be in that same role or in that same company, and you may outlast them. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I'm curious to know you spent a lot of your career as an editor at trade and corporate publishers, but then you took a pivot and launched your own literary firm. So I'd love to learn about the decision making process of leaving the ecosystem of publishing and editing and going into being a literary agent. What is an agent and why did you make that pivot?
Yeah, yeah. But the first time I pivoted like that was when I left Amistad. Because Amistad, that was a dream job for me, being a founding editor at independent Black owned and run company. It was a startup. That's just startup companies are their own, ball of wax. So I did that for about 5, 6 years, and then I left there. So again, I'm leaving a job voluntarily. Every time I've left a job voluntarily, Simon and Sister the first time, then Amistad, I leave, I have to leave with some kind of income, a project or something. The first time it was to author a book, and the second time it was to create what I call Blue Media Editorial Services. And I took um, I dipped into agenting a little bit, but I backed off. It was a different time. Fast forward to um, my 18 and a half year at Simon and Schuster, I'm laid off. Um, so there, I had to regroup um, and think of what I'm going to do as an independent. Because I've always believed in the other thing I think is good for you to have inside you is to, if you have it, lose the fear of being unemployed.
Mm.
Terrified. Okay. And um, my answer to losing the fear of being unemployed was to create income streams for myself, whether I got a new job or not. So I've always managed to do that. I am straight up Tennessee African American, not Jamaican, but 3 jobs is the
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah.
My family, as well. So, uh, I'm freed up from corporate work once again. I have to put something together. I tell you, I'm an agent really um, because I love supporting other writers. Um, I wouldn't be an agent otherwise. It's cool, it can be fun, but it's very risky. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to sustain, you know. You're really out there, which is why I have 3 streams of income.
Which is so smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that even as a business owner and as a publisher, I'm learning that, and people have said this time and time again, I just am a little defiant and I believe there's money in this space, but people, I don't know if you've experienced this or people have shared this to you, but people say you don't really get into the book industry to make money because there's not much money to be made. Although when you look at the stats, It's a $310 billion industry globally. And I think the US alone brings anywhere from 25 to 50 billion. So the money is there, but I think for the people like us who work in this space, we have to be very creative on how we earn our money and have to have all these different streams of revenue because a lot of the revenue that's made in the industry is being taken by the big five and all of these conglomerates. So with that being said, you currently are on the founding team. You're one of two executive editors at Awa Press, which was founded by Questlove, which is a division and a parent company under Macmillan. Tell us more about this imprint, how you've come to work with Questlove, and what the imprint represents.
Yeah, well, the imprint represents a stream inside the ecosystem of trade publishing where you use uh, public figures, well-known people's platforms to promote to a certain kind of reader. Okay. There have been many of these kind of imprints for a long time. And they, over time, they've included Black public figures more and more. For example, one of the early famous names to have their own imprint, 50 Cent, as Simon and Schuster. He's had some kind of book imprinter program there now for, oh my goodness, probably approaching 20 years. So, that hip hop icon, has been a player in publishing with a label, as it were, with his name, for a long time. What's her name? Phoebe Robinson, Two Dope Chicks. She has her imprint.
I know Charlamagne the God has his own imprint.
God has his, at Atria. So Amir Thompson having his particular but very broad platform, from late night TV to music, podcast and all this kind of thing, and successful books to his name. Farrar, Straus and Giroux, which is a venerable old Black publisher that is inside of Macmillan, is now, big fish, less big fish, different kind of big fish, with when you get down to these celebrity branded imprints. And Amir has that kind of interest. He's a book person, he's the combination of hipness and nerdiness, and he reads. So, and he has ideas, obviously, many ideas about that. So they saw the Farrar, Straus and Giroux in the MCD division of that, saw the wisdom. And I'm throwing all of these names, because I know that you have professionally interested readers to signal, what the map of the ecosystem is, the corporate map. People talk about where they're just, 4 or 5 companies in publishing, but there are dozens of imprints and brand names, and you know what I'm saying. And Awua is one of the newer ones in that. And I love it because of its uniqueness, represented by Amir's broad taste in fiction, not fiction. He's not just about music at all. History, his personal story attached to the Clotilde, the slave ship that was unearthed. He's come to realize, a personal connection in the history space, that way. So for me, it's an exciting opportunity to do something a little bit different from what I've been doing in book publishing now for decades.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious to also learn the business behind imprints. And I'm glad that you mapped it out for the listeners out there, because I know a lot of times when people think big publishers, they only think of the big five. but each big five publisher has multiple dozens, if not, I would maybe say hundreds of imprints that exist underneath that company. So, let's say a celebrity or an influencer out there is listening and they're thinking of starting a publishing venture. What does starting an imprint at a parent company or a big five publisher look like? Does that person own the rights to their books? Is that shared with the big five or with the publisher? And what does the money look like? Does that imprint solely responsible for the funding of their production, or is that one of the many benefits of being with the larger publisher is that they cover all those production costs?
Yeah, all that's negotiable really. And you have to, and each deal has its own uh, particular particularity. Um, there's the traditional publisher author relationship where you have a contract to do a books or books plural, and the terms of that contract are standard in terms of royalties, 10 to 15% for hardcovers, against retail or net. Traditional publishing, primary rights, publication, subsidiary rights, foreign rights, all that kind of business. Then you have the other kind of relationships that publishers have with creatives and authors, which could look like a joint venture. I've worked with at least one author who had joint venture with their publisher, and TD Jakes was that. Well, TD Jakes is his own empire.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So that's a company partnering with a company as opposed to an individual
imprint.
Yeah, or content creator for the publisher. So it can happen like that. It can happen like indie publishers, like Vicky Stringer, who had Triple Crown Press. Uh, uh, a press like that and presses like that have been invited, well, have been bought, larger publishing companies just outright buy those companies and they become imprints. That's what happened with Amistad, actually. It was an independent company when I was with them. I left. And then a few years later, Charles Harris sold it to HarperCollins, and there it becomes an imprint. So it happens different ways, So the business arrangement, how the principal person earns money for that is going to differ according to the person.
Yeah. Thank you so much for breaking that down. I know it can be very confusing, and a big reason why I wanted to start this platform and this podcast is to break down the business behind the book, because I feel like the publishing industry can be very secretive. It's not something that you can just Google and find all of the answers to. And so conversations like this and breakdowns are really helpful for our audience. And so in short, there are so many different ways to be an imprint under one of the big five. I think for a lot of independent publishers, we always just think of, we build up our independent publishing company and then we sell it, it's then acquired, and that's the only way to be an imprint. But there are so many different business models that exist for that to happen. But I'm glad that you mentioned your time working at an independent publisher, and I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are the advantages that independent book publishers have that corporate publishers don't?
Well, the biggest one, I think, is that you don't have to answer to people who aren't as familiar with what you do as you are. For example, if you're a parent company in books and you're owned by a food manufacturer, you know what I mean? Somebody who's selling breakfast cereals and loaves of bread, and it's happened. At one point, Simon & Schuster was owned by this company. It's probably good that I can't remember their names. I haven't heard about them, but they own sugar plantations, in Haiti, and Madison Square Garden. You know what I'm saying? These corporate alliances aren't always between entities that do the same kind of business. So that can be a problem. Simon and Sisters had a number of owners, and they were recently owned by CBS. They are right now. So that was seen as an easier alliance because it was all media. Maybe yes, maybe no. You know what I mean? It depends on who's running these companies at the time. It all gets down again relationships. The human beings. Behind this. And a company can't exist. Simon and Schuster started from men who were publishing crossword puzzles. It grew into this empire. So things change, over time. And all of that, has to be investigated to understand what the publishing business is really about and how media is impacted by things that we don't associate with being media. Like that person who has, they want your publishing company to be tilted right wing because they're right wing or left wing because they're left wing. You know what I'm saying? Ownership matters.
It does. And I'm so glad that you said that. That was honestly a big reason why I'm still doing this work as an independent publisher. I always say I got into it by accident. I self-published a book, then started helping kids in my community publish books, and that led into a publishing company. But my initial reason for starting a publishing company wasn't because I wanted to be in the industry and be a disruptor. It was, oh, I see a need for a book, I'm going to do it. And then the more I learned about the industry, the more that I realized, oh, we need ownership. We need more Black owned publishers. It kind of goes back to our conversation on imprints. But I remember when I was first entering into the industry, I would just read PW articles all day because that was like my only gateway into the industry. And I would read about this person who started an imprint and this person started an imprint. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. They're doing the work. And then a year would pass, 2 years would pass, and then it would be radio silent. And I would always ask myself, it seems like there are people who are starting the work of starting these publishing companies, but then we don't hear from them anymore. And it always goes back to ownership. Who owns that publishing company? Who owns that content? Because they make the decisions on what goes and what doesn't. And so for anybody who's listening, I hope that this is encouraging you if you are thinking about starting a publishing company or currently are an independent publisher. Know that the work that we do is needed and is necessary, because if we're not going to do it, who's going to? I made a post a few weeks ago, and I was like, there's nobody coming to save us in this industry. I don't think that, it's my personal opinion, I could get some flack on it, but I don't have trust in institutions who weren't built for us to do the work required to promote more diverse books and to keep them long lasting. And I think that the way that we see that is by starting our own. So I'm just so inspired by you and so many other people who have worked in the industry, because the experience that you guys have is so necessary. And it's one of the things that I feel like me as an independent publisher who never worked for a publisher before is the thing that I'm missing. So loving this conversation. And I know we're coming up on time, but my last question to you is, you wear so many hats. You are a developmental editor, a consulting editor, an agent, a writer, an acquiring editor. And I know you've worn those hats in different periods of your life, but those are all skill sets that you have. So how do you balance that? How do you know when it's time to write a book just for you as an author? How do you know when it's time to acquire a book and work with an editor? And how do you balance all of these skill sets that you've acquired over the years?
It's it's hard to do. You have to go with the flow, and that sounds all loosey goosey and all, but you have a sense of when you're taking on too much, and sometimes immediate circumstances make the plan for you.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to say, most of the books that I published, it wasn't my idea to do it at that time. Somebody came to me with an opportunity. And then I said, oh, so, life, the universe, can order things for you. It's like preparation. You just have to be prepared. You have to, and how you get prepared in life, I think, is to do what you really believe in and what you really like. So if baseball is your thing, then continue doing that while you do everything else. And if you do that well, you're going to attract the opportunity. I love your story because your self-study is what you would be guided toward if you had done formal study. For example, and what I mean by example is reading PW religiously.
Yeah.
Reading, I love literature and the classics. I don't knock that. Anybody who is a nerd in any aspect of that, you know, respect. However, that is not the business of publishing. But stay in that, because you'll be the person who, in a publishing company, creates, supports, makes successful a publishing program around that kind of literature. Think of how many contemporary works of fiction have been written, inspired by Jane Austen. So if you're that kid who's, you know what I'm saying? So um, do everything. Don't abandon your passions, I think is the best way for me to put the advice. If you're into fly fishing, if you're into hip hop, if you're into R&B between 1914 and 19, whatever, stay there, do what you have to do to live and keep your sanity and your physical health, to take that opportunity when you meet the publisher of Random House at a same conference where they're looking for talent. You know what I mean? It's very within. You know, it's it's have something you're passionate about, because you can't do the publishing is about everything, every topic in the world, the whole universe of information. So you have to find your lanes. So you have to be passionate enough about something to go deep in it, to become, I don't like the word expert, but I'm going to use it here for the interest of time, but to become an expert in that thing, in a language, in whatever, especially your own, related to your own story. Whatever your past is, your roots are, it's going to be fertile fodder for some kind of project related to your profession. Whether you were dirt poor, coming up as a kid, or you came up the son of Bill Gates.
Yeah. I love that you said flow, and it's so funny that you mentioned that. At the start of each year, I pick a word to just ground myself in for that year. And you said both of them. One of them was flow and the other was rooted. And the reason why flow is one, and I love that you talked about that, is because different opportunities present themselves at different times. There could be there was a season of your life where you were an editor, you were an acquiring editor, and then you were called to write and to let your creativity just run free and to be a writer in that moment. And so I think that for the people listening out there, and for even myself, reminding ourselves that flow is okay. Because I think, especially for someone like me, I'm a Virgo. So I'm like, if this is the mission, this is all I'm focusing on. I have tunnel vision. I don't see nothing else. I don't hear nothing else. But having that flow is so important, because you never know what opportunity is going to present themselves. And I think being in a state of flow, you're fluid, you're able to move with the change, and things are always changing. It's the only constant. And so I'm so glad that you said that. And I'm so glad that we shared this time together. My very last question and segment of the show is, and this is new, y'all, so it may change, but for right now, it's called Let's Do Better, because I know that there are a lot of allies that are listening, and I want this to be a learning experience for everybody. And so my question to you is, what is the craziest thing that has happened to you or has been said to you while working in this industry? An example, and I can go first, is I remember going to a publishing conference for publishers, for small to mid-sized publishers. And a man who will not be named seen me because I go to these conferences all the time. And so I think this time I had braids. And so he comes up to me and like grabs and not just like one braid, like he grabs a grip of my braids and is like, is this all your hair? Your hair grew so much from the last time I seen you. I didn't know. And he's like continuing to touch my braids. And I'm just sitting in this conference room across from this white man, awkwardly standing as he's touching my hair. And I'm just like, no, it's not. But I was just so amazed that he felt so comfortable to come and touch my hair in that way. So I say all that to say, Malaika, I'd love to hear from you. What has been a story or a moment that stands out to you that has happened in this industry?
I have one of those hair stories. I have two of those hair stories, and I'm not going to repeat them because it's the same.
Yeah.
Somebody physically, invades your space, your body, and in my case, it's women. One in the office and one who saw me in the street who worked at a whole other division who had we had zero contact. That person also uh, um, tried to hire me, bring me on just a few years ago, and that was a hard no. That kind of thing. Leah, the list is so long, and I try not to keep the laundry list, at top of mind, and then I'll remember, my stuff. Sometimes it's not even what they say, but what they do, like exclude you from a meeting. Well, one of the things that come to mind is one of the things that I've suffered from, and I use that term "suffered" loosely, is people in the industry apologizing, low key apologizing for not letting me know about certain opportunities, job wise, project wise, because I have one group that say, oh, you're so upmarket, suggesting that because I've signed, quote, literary writers, Maurice Condé or somebody, that I would be interested in a commercial writer or something like that, which is ridiculous if you look at my record. If you know anything about me professionally and not just dealing with some superficial rumor. Then there's another set of people who, because I had published great and successful works of urban fiction and erotica, have said to me, I thought you only published trash. Yeah, you see. So
That's when we have to take the 10 seconds of a deep breath if you have the time in that moment to gather yourself.
yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you respond to that?
Well, it depends on who the person is. Sadly, I have to say that person was a Black male bookshop owner. And so I took them over to our booth in BEA because this is where we were, the book expo, right? The big trade show. So I said, well, because that's what I was doing with this person anyway. I was attempting to lure them over to look at the books, that I had coming up anyway. So I just took him over and, this is what I'm doing, you know, whatever you want to call it. These are my authors this season. Uh, because one, I'm not going to let somebody lure me into a fight.
Mm.
There are different ways to fight. I'm inspired by the ninja ways to fight. As opposed to the, grease my face up, take my earrings off, type thing. But all of those, grabbing the hair, saying something inappropriate, looking at you inappropriately. There's also the flip side of the insult where, once there was an occasion that my coworkers were trying to buy me a present. And so one of my re- realer friends, white friends in the office, she said it was such a discussion about what to get me because they were leaning toward jewelry. And, I wear what I wear, Black artisans, and, I look how I look. And,
Fly.
and somebody says, no, she has her own jeweler because they'd heard me talk about it, which in a way I did, brother actually from Atlanta, Juju, from Atlanta, brother from DC, the goldsmith, you know what I mean? So it gets down to people trying to be nice, as Chris Rock, would say, the nice white people, and she has her own jeweler, which is hilarious to me. So you
Yeah.
have to also, I don't think I said anything about a sense of humor, is I don't say don't do anything, but if you're not a Black, brown person with a sense of humor, do not get in the business of publishing.
Mm,
Bring
yeah.
that sense of humor with you.
You're gonna need it. You're
Yeah.
gonna need it.
But beware if you laugh too in too animated a way, like Kamala, they're gonna talk about you too.
Hmm. They're going to find something to talk about either way, but I think that's why the humor is important because the humor is for us. It's not necessarily for you. It's one of the strategies we have to keep on going and to stay focused on the prize. So that's a great note to end on. Malaika, thank you so much again for joining me in this conversation and for honestly just opening up your arms to me since the first time we met and being willing to give me information and resources and to engage in these conversations. I know it's helped me so much, and I really hope that it's helped our listeners out there. But feel free to please tell us where people can follow you and follow your books or any upcoming projects that you want to share with people before we get out of here.
Well, the agency website is aderosliterarytribe.com. So you can keep up there, and you can send me messages there. And if you're interested in being on my newsletter mail list, which is occasional, I don't do like regular per month. Then please. But thank you so much, Leah. You're helping me, and have helped me already. So I look forward to the ongoing development of the ecosystem.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much.